Welcome to the Tomorrow's World Today podcast. We sit down with experts, world-changing innovators, creators, and makers to explore how they're taking action to make tomorrow's world a better place for technology, science, innovation, sustainability, the arts, and more.
In this episode, George Davison, host of Tomorrow's World Today on the Science Channel, sits down with Dustin Miller, the Vice President of Programs and Learning at the Dallas Arboretum and Botanical Garden, to discuss the company's 40 years of service. Dustin shares insights on how the Dallas Arboretum is transforming landscapes into immersive educational experiences, integrating seasonal displays like the Pumpkin Village, and their groundbreaking approach to visitor engagement through nature. Now, here's George.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Tomorrow's World Today. And today we're fortunate enough to have Dustin Miller, who happens to be the Vice President of Programs and Learning at the Dallas Arboretum and Botanical Gardens. Did I say that right, Dustin?
You did. You got it.
All right. So we're off to a good start then. Well, I was hoping you could start us off with a little bit of background on yourself and your position at the gardens.
Sure. I'm trained as an anthropologist, and actually my background is as a classroom teacher. So my role here at the garden actually started in the education team, and over the last 10 years, I've worked with operations, public events, marketing, guest experience, volunteers, you name it. I've worked on that team, but currently, my job is really focused on creating meaningful, immersive experiences that bring people closer to nature here in the garden and throughout Dallas.
Very nice. Well, that sounds like a nice job to have. So out of all that, which part of that would you say is the most exciting, Dustin, for you?
For me, every year it's our pumpkin village. So every autumn we bring in 100,000 plus pumpkins, gourds, and squash. They all come in from one farm in West Texas, and together with the horticulture team, my public events team, and I create a theme around pumpkins. This year it was actually Texas Town. Texans love a good Texas theme. So we had things like a giant cowboy hat as the roof on a 30-foot house. Every year's a new adventure with the Pumpkin Village, so it's definitely my favorite display of the year.
What's funny is that I was telling my wife I was going to be doing this meeting with you today, and she mentioned to me that she had just been there. And does that look a little familiar?
It does.
That's one of her pictures. She loved it.
Yeah, we have over 65 varieties of pumpkins every year. So we get to do some really fun displays like that show off how diverse that plant is.
Well, she had a really good time. So a great guest experience. So that's a nice plus. So now that we're learning a little bit more of like exhibits and what you do, could you talk a little bit about the history? How did it come to be? Was this just an idea that came out of thin air, or was it a person, a group of people? Could you run me up to speed there?
Yeah, originally we were two separate properties on White Rock Lake, the DeGoyer Estate and the Camp Estate. And we've now been a public garden for 40 years. We're actually celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. So those two properties were merged together 40 years ago and opened as a public garden. And it was really a mix of folks from the city, both on the government side, but also private citizens that wanted to preserve this sanctuary on the lake as a way to showcase horticultural beauty. Both properties had some beautiful gardens. We have a pecan grove that's original to the site. So it was really something that folks came together across the city to preserve this space and make it a public space.
Wow. So before that, these were two large pieces of land. Is that right?
That's right. White Rock Lake back in the day was sort of the summer vacation area of folks from Dallas that would venture over to the east side of the city. But there are some original properties all the way around the lake, but these two were 66 acres between the two properties that were two separate private homes.
Very nice. And did you have something to work with in advance? Like, were there already gardens at these two large pieces of ground?
There were some gardens, especially closer to the properties. And in some ways, we've actually been able to keep some of those original gardens and refurbish them. So you can see some original pieces that would have been here when they were private residences.
Wow, that's great. So it's got some newer history and some older history. That's nice. Because usually, I mean, everything starts with, an idea. So it sounds like somebody, maybe one of those family members really had a thing for either flowers or gardening, actual food to eat, right?
Yep. And the DeGoyer property actually has a private courtyard inside the house as well, which had all kinds of tropical plants. And that's something that very few people get to see unless they're peeking out the windows of the house. But a lot of our staff enjoy going to that space and visiting it as well.
Wouldn't that be beautiful to grow up in an environment like that? I would be in there all day long. All right. So can you talk a little bit about how your organization conducts research to figure out what kind of future events should you compose? You guys put on a lot of events. So can you talk a little bit about how you research it and figure it out?
Sure. We gather a ton of visitor feedback, analyzing attendance trends and evaluating successes of everything from a single visit to large-scale exhibits. We do that both internally and through third parties. And of course, using readily available cell phone data, we can learn a lot about our visitors as well. We also do in-person focus groups. Each of our work areas, like the education team, public events, have committees that work with them and provide on-the-ground support and input as well. So really collecting a lot of data across a multitude of sources to think about what our future looks like.
So after you have let's call it the general data, do you brainstorm? Do you do that as a team, or is that an individual endeavor?
Both, depending on the role. For myself, with the public events team, it's typically bringing in thought leaders from different work groups, so operations, private events, the folks doing our weddings and corporate events, because they often know the best trends and some cool new vendors. Bringing in the horticulture team, obviously, we're a garden, so we have to be thinking about our plants at all times. So it really is kind of bringing in our directors and our VPs from across the garden as we brainstorm and think about these larger exhibits. That being said, I am definitely a proponent that there are folks who we need their voices to be louder, and in that case, we do have smaller working groups for things like future exhibits or strategic plan, so that we are making sure that we're putting our best foot forward. We collaborate intensely and intensively, but we also build in time for individuals to bring their best ideas forward and to run with those. My previous title was Director of Innovation, and half my role was specifically creating new ideas, pitching concepts, and running with them and trialing them. I live by an old design mantra of Maya, most advanced yet acceptable. So we're always trying to push our audience just a little bit further, so that they look back and say, wow, we've made this leap from here to here, but they feel comfortable or they feel willing to do that as we continue to push programs and new ideas forward.
Okay, so if I was to say to you, I wanted to chat with you a little bit about, the world of inspiration and trying to get a better handle on what inspires people. And of course, we have different ages, different types of people and whatnot. But I'd like to get your thoughts on, how do you feel nature inspires human beings?
Sure. On the surface, we know that all the data says kids in particular are happier, healthier, and smarter when they spend time in nature. I'm a past board member of the Texas Children in Nature Network. So this is a mantra I live by. But, I think in the garden, what we do so well here in Dallas is we do things on a scale that a lot of people can't do at home and they don't see in other places. So when you visit us in spring, we have 500,000 tulips. And there's just no way to really feel what that number looks like unless you're here. And there's no way to not be inspired by that sheer volume of what's happening. 100,000 pumpkins. I think this year we're up to nearly 2 million lights in the trees for holidays. So our job is to take people's breath away and inspire them, and then say, and here's how you could get a little bit of this feeling at home. So while I don't recommend anyone planting 500,000 tulips, you can plant them in a way that gives you a huge color pop that most people aren't going to do. Typically people are taking individual bulbs and spacing them out, and you get some color in your garden. But if you take those 50 bulbs, put them all into into a little 1 foot area, you're going to get that color pop that we create here at the garden at home.
That's fabulous. I love that idea of, when you do this at scale, you try to take people's breath away and inspire them. That's wonderful to be a part of a project like that. One of the things that I like to try to understand is how nature affects the human body in such a way that it can refresh it and then inspire, let's say, creative activities. And so have you made any observations of people, human beings that have come into your immersive environment and then felt this inspiration, and then it helps them to develop, make, or build creative things?
Yeah, the folks that we interact with on a long-term basis is especially pronounced in our education team. So we do some programming with 10 area elementary schools where we're interacting with the same kids over 3 years, 36 times across the 3 years. So a lot of treatments, but we're both visiting them and they're coming here to the garden. So on one end, we can look at the numbers and test them on their science knowledge, and we see that growth. But also, some of these kids are living in an apartment building. They walk 1 block to their school, they walk 1 block to their grocery store, and that's their life. They live in this little bubble. So when they come to the garden, it could literally be the first time that they see a monarch butterfly. And the reaction of kids, I'm getting my arm hair standing up talking about this because I've seen it so many times. Like the number of kids that step off a bus and are mesmerized by something that we see every single day, an element of nature that is integral to the garden that I may overlook after 10 years. A 5th grader can step off a bus and make it new to me again too.
Oh, that's fabulous. So it's inspiring them. You see them inspired. It inspires you. Yeah, that's kind of catchy. That's a nice pop right there. So how about you personally? Do you ever go to nature to inspire yourself before you get into, let's say, brainstorming or ideation?
Yeah, actually my preferred workspace, and my team will tell you this because I call them while I'm doing it, is my afternoon runs or my evening runs, my weekend runs. I run along the Santa Fe Trail, but I'll skip off into different areas, and that's where I do all my brain work. All my crazy ideas come from runs. I think the endorphins and the adrenaline just put my brain in the right space to think about things. So I'll call by one of my managers, and she'll be like, "You're on a run again, aren't you?"
They've learned your nature.
Yeah. And you'll never catch me on a treadmill, that's for sure.
Right. So so when you're immersed in nature, like you're running on a trail beside a stream, it sounds like, what do you think? We have natural sounds as well as what our eyes see. Do you think that the more immersive you can get, the better off you are?
I think it depends on the individual. Not everyone is raised in a place where nature's safe or where they have nearby nature. So I think it's also understanding that we have a variety of audiences who interact with nature in a different way. For me, it is like I can disappear into a trail. I grew up in rural Indiana and would run through the woods and not think twice about it and just enjoy the experience. But that's not a reality for everybody. So it could be that kid who steps off the bus and sees a butterfly for the first time. It could be that we're doing an outreach program for kids who may never have the opportunity during this year to come to the garden, but we can take them out to the parking lot in their school and show that there's actually a living ecosystem, and it's a way for them, it's a baby step to connect with nature.
I like that. Yeah, that sounds really good. Well, you guys are really working hard, thinking hard on this stuff. You guys are really doing a lot of research. Is that a big piece of behind the scenes of what you guys are doing?
Yeah, we're making sure that every program we do is connecting people, place, and plants. So if we're hitting those 3 marks, we know we're doing good work, but it could look very different depending on the program, the audience, or even the time of year.
Yeah, I could see that. All right. So what aspect of, the gardens, the natural element of what you have there, do you find the most inspiring?
This changes every year for me. I think that it is those seasonal changes, the massive seasonal color changes we have in the early spring, Texas spring, February, when our early hyacinths start blooming, the air is so crisp and clean that the scent from the hyacinths almost knocks you over. It's a scent that I don't think is allowed to come through as cleanly the rest of the year. There's some other scents throughout the year that I really enjoy, but that spring hyacinth is just intoxicating. But I do love when we're in the peak of Dallas blooms and it's tulips as far as the eye can see. But then if you ask me in the fall and those pumpkins are loading in, I'm pumpkin crazy.
All right. And how do you think being surrounded by nature is impacting your visitors?
I go back to that data of happier, healthier, smarter. And in the same way that a run allows me to feel like I'm investing the most into my creative thinking, providing a space that is visually beautiful, that provides folks an opportunity for fitness, for building community within their family or with others, just sets the right scene for them to be the best version of themselves. And whether that is doing a hands-on cooking class and learning something new, whether it's bringing the family out and making a holiday wreath together, or whether it's enjoying a food and wine festival and meeting some of the best chefs in the city, everyone has a different motivation and a different way that they can grow here in the garden.
Well, that was a great transition, because I was just going to ask, I'd like to talk with you a little more about the world of creation and how an inspired mind is more prone to the act of creation than a mind that is, let's say, not so released or so free. Because you do cooking classes there, you do have wreath making classes. Your organization puts together a lot of hands-on making activities. So could you talk a little bit about these classes that you're putting on and what that's helping your audience to do?
Sure. We try to provide an outlet for folks to learn something new that's inspired or connected to the natural world. So it could be cooking and using fresh ingredients. Our Garden to Tasteful place has been open a little over 5 years now, but we have seasonal plantings of traditional vegetable gardens right outside the beautiful rental venue. And it's one of the most popular spaces in the garden. And inside, the programming then is inspired by those gardens that are right there. So it's showing people unique varieties, showing how to harvest, showing how to extend the life. We did a class on making broths, and we used corn cobs, and you can make a corn broth from something that you would normally throw away. So really sort of thinking about the whole life of a plant and all the ways that you can interact with it. But then we also do programming around creative arts. Obviously, it's easy to be inspired by nature to create art. Fitness classes, again, putting folks in nature, doing something that helps them feel healthy and well as well. But it's really providing different experiences for folks. It could be attending a concert, getting the best view of White Rock Lake with a sunset. We've got a beautiful view of downtown Dallas. So it really can be an inspiring space just for relaxing as well. I think you don't always have to be actively learning to be learning or to be connecting with nature.
Yes, I would agree with that. Just immersing yourself is a learning experience. And I think it releases you so that you can use your observational skills to maybe release yourself in a way that you can take the chance, make something that you've never made before and learn something. I think that's good for the human soul, so to speak.
Exactly.
Are there elements of traditional botanical gardens that influence the techniques that you teach?
Sure. I think there's always an audience for some traditional classes like how do you prepare soil, how do you propagate plants, but also integrating modern practices. So how can you use xeriscaping? Our children's garden uses no pesticides once plants are in the garden. So we talk about our eco-friendly pest management. How can you do that at home? Watered down molasses is a great way to deter fire ants from a structure. So we are a botanic garden. We're a subclass called a show garden. So we are all about being big, flashy Dallas. But of course, behind all of that are our tried and true horticulture techniques that we're also actively showing folks how to use at home.
That makes sense. So what feedback have you received from participants about how the classes have changed their perspective on nature?
We have a core group of folks who especially come to our free cooking demos. So over time, I have volunteers that I know on a personal basis. I have guests that I see. I've watched their kids grow up over the last 10 years. So we interact. I talk to them, ask how their experience was. They share their new recipe inspired by something we did. Also, folks reach out with ideas about exhibits and about classes that they would like to see. So I think there's always an open dialogue with our guests. But if you come to a Monday morning Dallas College Cooks, you're going to see the same people week over week, month over month, year over year, because they've created a community around that program. And we see that with a lot of our repeating programs.
That's a big accomplishment. Congratulations on that. So let's talk about how integral are the STEM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, to the overall success and innovation within your organization?
Sure. I think the obvious example is our education programming. So we work with about 100,000 school-aged children and teachers in the average year, primarily in K-6 education. So that can be a traditional field trip, it could be an outreach program, things like homeschool programs, Girl Scout programs, and we're really focused primarily on earth and life science, but also on STEM concepts around things like scale. But it's not just in education that we see this. As a business, we are data-driven and focused on collecting that data in an effective way, but making sure we're using it. So I think that we are also living sort of the best practices of STEM in that way as well. And then specific to horticulture, our trials program is long running, is one of the most sought after data sets for professional growers. And it really has proven that we can show people how to push the limits with plantings, what can produce very well in Dallas, both for a vegetable planting, but also for an ornamental garden. So we have 3 different locations within the garden where we are collecting data every single day, year round, and then we share that data out with the public and with the industry.
Okay, so you called it your trials program. Could you explain exactly what that is?
Sure. So new growers who are trialing different varieties or cultivars of a plant, say tomatoes, and they're trying to create something that produces the most cherry tomatoes in the Southwest. They will send us plants or send us cuttings. We'll grow, collect data, send it back to them. They'll do the same with other gardens. And then that really helps them inform their decisions on what plants they want to continue growing. And eventually the goal is that they will make it to the public, and it'll be a cultivar that you can buy at your local nursery and put into your garden and get the most tomatoes per square foot that you've ever seen.
That's a great program. I like that one too. All right, good stuff. How about strategies that you might employ to foster engagement and collaboration with individuals and organizations in your surrounding community?
I think the biggest inroads that we're making is really leaning on community partners. I think the age-old concept of no man is an island has never rung truer. So we are actively building partnerships in all of our work areas where it's mutually beneficial. So over the last 7 years, we've grown some cultural programming. Our Hispanic Heritage Celebration has a quinceañera fashion show. It was something that our previous CEO saw day in and day out, beautiful quinceañera dresses in the garden with 15-year-old girls getting their formal photos here at the garden. And we said, we can celebrate this. This is authentic to who we are, to who Dallas is, and let's showcase this beautiful cultural tradition. From there, we've also added our Black Heritage Celebration, Pride in Bloom. We do different pop-ups throughout the season. So when we did Texas Town, we had Choctaw dancers come and join us. We had Ballet Folklorico join us. So really helping to round out that experience of Texas Town and what Texas looks like today and in the past. So I think it's always about thinking of the most inclusive programming that can open up our doors and our gates to the widest audience to learn more about the world around them.
It sounds like you guys really are very observant about opportunities to have festive ideas that bring an audience to your place. So that kind of gets me to this next question. If you don't mind, this will be our last question today, but what does the future look like for the Dallas Arboretum and Botanical Gardens?
I think our future is bright. We are in a new strategic plan that we're rolling out at the end of the year for the next 5 years. So based on all of our stakeholders, we're increasing sustainability efforts, enhancing our plant research and access to that research, and also introducing new programs that reflect our mission. And like I said before, keeping people, place, and plants front and center.
Well, it's a great future I see. People are lucky to be down there near you, or any visitors that come into town. Sounds like a great place to go. I know my wife had a really good time there. So thank you for what you do, Dustin. Would like to thank you, Dustin, for taking your time and helping us to understand your world a little more.
Yeah, thank you for your time, and we're excited to have your followers come out and see us.
All right. Well, everybody, that's another edition of Tomorrow's World Today. Bye now. Till next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Tomorrow's World Today podcast. Join us next time as we continue to explore the worlds of inspiration, creation, innovation, and production. Discover more at tomorrowsworldtoday.com and connect with us on social media at TWT Explore. And find us wherever podcasts are available.